Hello and welcome again to Immigration News and Views. My name is David Nachman. I'm one of the managing attorneys at Nachman, Phulwan, Zimovcak Law Group, and we have offices in New Jersey, New York City. We also have affiliated offices in Mumbai, India, and also in Canada. And today I'm joined by Veronique Malka, who is the manager of our Canadian Law Division. Good morning, Veronique.
Hi, David.
And so what we're going to do today is we're going to kind of take off from where we left off with one of the last videos about the crossing the border entries from Canada and into the United States, back and forth. And Veronique wrote some excellent articles which will be posted on our website, which will explain some of these issues. But what we wanted to do is take a little time to just elaborate a little bit for our viewers about some of these issues.
Hi, folks. So oftentimes some of our clients will come to us, and whether or not we help them with their paperwork to get into the country, whether the U.S. or Canada, we are often approached about border coaching. As lawyers, we have very interesting scenarios to deal with when we are asked to border coach a client. Sometimes it's straightforward. The client got a work permit or a visa to come work in the country, and we just have to explain to them what the officer will ask, what they're looking for, and what they should respond. Other times, our clients might ask us about more touchy situations where, for example, they would like to come to the U.S. They think they'd like to stay. How long are they allowed to stay for? Up to 6 months. Okay, yeah, they'd like to stay 6 months, but maybe they want to even stay longer than that. They're not sure. You know, so we as lawyers have a responsibility to our clients to advise them of what they are allowed to do and what they should say at the border, and if they don't say what they should say at the border, what might happen if they don't do it. So a typical example that I have faced, for example, is where a client in the U.S. has a girlfriend in Canada, and he has been wanting to visit her over the years, obviously more and more and more. He does not want to get married. They do not want to get married. But the relationship has become serious enough now that he's been traveling to Canada for long periods of time at a time, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. Then he returns to the U.S. He has disposed of his residence in the U.S. They basically are living together in Canada. And he stays a week or two, visits his relatives, then returns. Well, lo and behold, I'm going to get a call, and I did get a call. The officers at the border going into Canada stopped him and said, "What are you doing? We notice here from the records that you've been going in quite a bit." "Well, you know, I'm visiting over there, but I'm an American citizen, and, you know, I do come back, and here's the address," which, by the way, is the address of his relatives, not his address. It did not go well. Why didn't it go well? Because he wasn't being honest with the officer. So it is important, in my opinion, in David's opinion, we believe honesty is always the best policy with an officer. Even if it means that the officer will say, "Well, then, I can't let you in today, but this is what you need to do. So go home, do it, and then you can come in next time." That is always, wouldn't you say, David, the best route, because then at least you don't face a bar, or you don't face an expulsion or an exclusion order from the country for misrepresentation. David, you could probably talk about misrepresentation, because we have faced those cases as well.
That's right. Well, actually, Veronique, what you're talking about is sort of the ancillary ethical rule that lawyers have, which is candor to the tribunal, and that is that we have to tell the truth. Same way we have to tell our clients to tell the truth. And we encourage our clients to tell the truth because it's better to tell the truth. Because what do they have an old saying that if you tell a lie, then it's going to be more and more complex, and it's going to be more and more difficult to remember. If you tell the truth, chances are, if you check with your legal professional, okay, and always check with a qualified legal professional ahead of time, what they'll be able to do is to explain to you how to couch that truth in such a way that it will be less potentially harmful to you. But at all costs, what you want to do is make sure that there are adequate disclosures that are being given to the government agencies. By way of an example, Veronique gave you an example on the family-based side of an individual going up to Canada. I'd like to share with you a question which I recently received from one of our viewers. It was an individual who was on a TN in the United States, and he was laid off from his position in TN status. He went back up to Canada to visit his family, and then he was going to come into the United States. His question to us was, can I use that TN to come back into the United States? Our answer was, it's best not to do that. It's best to make full disclosure, explain at this point in time that you've been laid off, you are no longer an employee of that organization that originally did your TN, and of course, as everyone knows, Canadians are visa exempt, so it's not a visa that the individual was showing, but they were applying for classification to enter the United States in TN status. And so the individual, rather than applying for the TN, would show up at the port of entry, explain the situation, and tell the officer that they're applying for a visitor's visa to come in and visit their friends or visit their family, or maybe just to wrap up their affairs, whatever the reason is. That course of action is going to bode better for the future.
Right, because think of how tempting it is. You've got the TN in your passport. It'd be so easy to skip that line and just wave that to the officer and go in. It's a lot harder to say to the officer, this really doesn't apply to me anymore. But like David said, officers really respect that. It may mean that it'll be a little more time at the border, but certainly the notes entered into the system will be much more favorable to the applicant. And like David also said, the truth always comes out. Now there's another concept that we like to coach our clients on in terms of going through the border, and it's called less is more. Oftentimes, you know, a client can get a little bit overwhelmed, especially if they've had a prior complicated immigration history. When we coach them, I find sometimes that my clients will say, but then should I say this and should I talk about that? And what about my fact that my parents overstayed? And what about, less is more. Answer the questions asked. The officer knows exactly what they're looking for. Now, if you find that an officer is starting to fish a little too much, that becomes a very interesting issue. And sometimes there are fishing expeditions that happen. If a fishing expedition happens, if an officer is starting to ask a lot of questions, instead of getting defensive, one good thing to do is to say, officer, you know, whatever you want, I'll give it to you. Just tell me, what is your concern? And maybe there's something I can actually give to you that will satisfy your concern. I have some letters, I have a lot of information in my briefcase, and I'd be happy to work with you. Kind of stop them nicely and politely in their stead. Show them that you want to work with them. And try to anticipate what it is that they're concerned about. Usually illegal work or overstay, right? So if that's the issue, perhaps you want to say, oh, you know, if you're concerned I might not go back, let me show you here. I have got my kids' report cards from school, you know. My kids are back in school over there. I'm coming back, you know. There's different things that we can actually help you with in terms of advising what information to carry with you in case you fell on an officer that was going to fish around a little too much.
And the corollary of that also is that there's certain things that you should not carry with you, of course. And one of the things that we tend to find is that our clients who potentially have romantic relationships on two sides of the border might carry with them, for example, things like engagement rings, or things like wedding rings, or things like pictures, and the officers do have the right to go through your bags. This past week we had an individual who specifically had her telephone, her cell phone was confiscated by a CBP officer who went through her pictures and found a picture of her engagement ring on the telephone. So these are the types of things that could give pause to an officer to make him believe that there might be immigrant intent when an individual might be applying for a non-immigrant entry. So with that, I'd like to thank our viewers for tuning in today. For any additional information with regard to any of the issues we've discussed or any other immigration cross-border issues between the United States and Canada, please feel free to reach out either for Veronique, Malka here in our office, or for any of our lawyers here at the NPZ Law Group. Thanks very much for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks,
Bye
David.
now.
Bye.